Imagine a family of 4 vanishing without a trace in one of the deadliest places on Earth. Their car abandoned in the middle of nowhere, no footprints, no calls for help, just silence. For 13 years, the desert kept it secret. Until one day the sands whispered back with a discovery so chilling, it still haunts those who found it. This is the story of the family that vanished in Death Valley. And before we begin, if you're new here and these hidden stories capture your imagination, make sure to hit subscribe and hit the notification bell. We share mysteries, crimes, and disappearances the world has nearly forgotten. Don't click away because this one will stay with you. Over the next few minutes, we're going to step inside one of the most baffling missing persons cases in modern history, the disappearance of a German family in Death Valley. We'll start with the family's last confirmed moves inside Death Valley, receipts, logbook signatures, and that rented minivan, so you can see the moment the adventure quietly veered off course. Next, we'll trace their route across the map, main roads to back roads, showing exactly where a simple decision turned into a life and death problem. You'll see what they likely saw, a road that looked harmless and wasn't. Then we'll walk you through the discovery of their stranded van in a remote canyon months later, and the massive search that followed. Hundreds of boots on the ground, helicopters in the air, and still no family. We'll follow their journey into the heat, the choices that sealed their fate, the years of unanswered questions, and finally, the discovery that broke the silence. We'll lay out the leading theories, shortcut gone wrong, heat, terrain, and test each one against hard evidence, distances, water, shade, and time. And at the end, we'll confront the hardest question of all. What happened in those last brutal miles, and why 2 small boys are still the saddest part of this mystery? Every step builds to a single human truth. In Death Valley, one choice can decide everything. It all began in July 1996. The Rimkus Meyer family had been in the United States for nearly 3 weeks. Egbert Rimkus, a 34-year-old architect from Dresden, wanted this trip to be a fresh start. He was recently divorced, and he hoped this adventure would bond him closer with his girlfriend Cornelia Meyer and their kids, 11-year-old George, Egbert's son, and little Max, just 4 years old, Cornelia's boy. On paper, it was a dream, a road trip through California's national parks. Just another family vacation. Smiles, photos, the open road. But like most families, there was more happening beneath the surface. Egbert's money was running out. He even called his bank back in Germany, requesting $1,500 to keep the trip going. The answer was no. Imagine the pressure. A man trying to give his family a once-in-a-lifetime vacation, while quietly worrying about how to pay for it. So he pushed on. He rented a 1996 Plymouth Voyager, a 2-wheel drive van. Not the kind of vehicle you'd want in a desert known for chewing up 4-wheel drives. But for Egbert, it was good enough. On July 22nd, the family stopped at Furnace Creek Visitors Center in Death Valley. They bought German-language guidebooks and even signed a guest log. Park staff remembered them, Cornelia smiling, the boys restless but excited. No one could have known they were about to step into one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Here's the crucial part. Egbert didn't take the safe, paved road west. He chose a remote dirt track toward Warm Springs and Mangle Pass. Maybe he was chasing adventure. Maybe he thought it would be shorter, faster, easier. We'll never know. But that choice, that single decision, would change everything. Picture it. 2 kids in the backseat. Temperatures outside soaring above 120 degrees. No cell phones, no GPS, just paper maps and a van not built for the terrain. And somewhere along that dusty road, surrounded by mountains and silence, a vacation became a nightmare. The last happy memory would be that logbook signature. What came next would confuse investigators, torment families, and leave searchers baffled for more than a decade. Because the next time anyone laid eyes on that family, they weren't alive. How did a simple family vacation vanish into thin air? And what terrifying discovery would be waiting in the desert years later? Don't go anywhere because the next discovery will change everything. 13 years after the family vanished, hikers Les Walker and Tom Mahood were deep in the backcountry of Death Valley. They weren't ordinary tourists. They were experienced explorers, men who knew how unforgiving this desert could be. On that day in 2009, their boots crunched across dry gravel as the sun beat down. The land was silent. And then, something caught their eyes. A weathered wallet, sun-bleached and cracked. Torn scraps of clothing faded almost to nothing. Then a shoe. And finally, bones scattered across the dust. The two men froze. After 13 years of silence, Death Valley had finally whispered the truth. Forensic teams moved in. Tests confirmed what many had feared. The remains belonged to Egbert Rimkus and Cornelia Meyer. The parents. At last, part of the mystery was solved. The family hadn't been kidnapped. They hadn't escaped back home. They had died out there, in the most brutal landscape on Earth. But the discovery raised an even more heartbreaking question. Where were the boys? George just 11. Max only 4. Their remains were never clearly identified among what was found. Maybe they were lost to scavengers. Maybe they lay somewhere the searchers never reached. Or maybe something else happened in those last desperate hours that no one has ever been able to prove. Imagine those final moments. Egbert and Cornelia, two exhausted adults, trying to shield their children from blistering heat. Walking mile after mile, clinging to the hope of reaching shelter. Imagine little Max's small hand slipping into his mother's, his tiny steps growing slower. George old enough to know the danger, trying to stay strong. The desert stretching endlessly around them. The choice to leave the van was a gamble. Maybe they thought they could make it to a distant mine or ranch. But the desert has no mercy. Every mile without water is a mile closer to collapse. And somewhere out there, under that burning sun, a family of 4 gave everything they had, until there was nothing left. That's the hardest truth of all. Not the search, not the theories, not the years of mystery, but the image of 2 young boys, their lives cut short in the middle of nowhere, their story unfinished, their voices never heard again. The case of the Death Valley Germans is more than a mystery. It's a tragedy. A reminder that even in our modern world, nature can still swallow us whole. One wrong turn, one fragile decision, and an entire family disappears into silence. Egbert trying to be the provider, Cornelia trusting in him. 2 boys full of life and laughter, caught in something far bigger than they could understand. For years their loved ones waited by the phone, hoping for news that never came. Until hikers, not detectives, uncovered the truth. But even then, it wasn't the full truth. The boys' story remains unfinished. Their final steps, their final moments, are still a mystery buried in the desert sands. And that's where I want to hear from you. What do you think really happened in those last hours? Did the parents lead the children into the desert, hoping for rescue only to collapse miles from help? Or is there something more, something still hidden out there in Death Valley waiting to be found? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And sometimes your theories bring new life to these stories. If stories like this move you, if you find yourself thinking about them long after the screen goes dark, then join us. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you'll always be here when we dive into the next unsolved case. Because behind every headline, every mystery, there are human lives. And together we can keep their stories alive.